The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Families were waving from the stands, camera flashes lit the air like fireflies, and graduates filed in with gowns swaying to the rhythm of pomp and circumstance. Somewhere near the front row, HarperCollins spotted them, her parents. Her mother wore that over-the-top floral hat she always reserved for important days, and her father, stiff in a navy blazer, adjusted his tie like it might choke him. They were easy to find. Their eyes were fixed on Madeline. Harper was 5 rows behind her younger sister in the processional. Madeline, always the star, the one they chose again and again. Even now, she walked with the confidence of someone certain the day belonged to her. Harper adjusted the stole around her shoulders, the custom one her grandmother Irene had embroidered just for this moment. In fine silver thread were the words, "Diamonds are made under pressure." The ceremony proceeded like a script Harper had rehearsed in her head 1,000 times. Only this time, reality would be better. When President Harlow stepped up to the podium to announce the honors, Harper's heartbeat quickened. Her hands weren't trembling. Not anymore. "Before we close today's celebration," he said, "we have several recognitions for extraordinary achievement." She heard her name, HarperCollins, and felt the entire room pause. Recipient of the National Collegiate Business Innovation Award, graduating with a perfect 4.0 GPA, founder of a business now serving clients in 3 states, fully self-funded education without financial support from family. A hush fell over the crowd. And then applause, rising, swelling, thunderous. Harper walked to the stage slowly, deliberately, as the sound of hands clapping echoed around her. She could see her parents in the crowd now, frozen. Her mother's smile was stuck halfway between pride and panic. Her father blinked, his jaw slightly open. They had no idea. And then Harper looked past them to her grandmother, Irene Collins, seated quietly in a simple blue dress, her eyes brimming with tears and a smile so full of pride it could shatter glass. This wasn't just a speech. It was a reckoning. From the outside, the Collins family looked like something out of a magazine. Their white 2-story home sat neatly on a tree-lined street in Boise, Idaho. The yard was always trimmed, the seasonal wreaths on the front door always fresh, and the holiday cards always displayed smiling daughters in color-coordinated dresses. But behind those carefully staged photos was a truth Harper had known since she was 7 years old. She would always come second. Madeline was born 2 years after Harper, and from the moment she arrived, it was as if the sun rose and set with her cries. Harper remembered being told to play quietly because Madeline was napping. She remembered school nights when her spelling tests were brushed aside in favor of Madeline's glitter-covered art projects. It wasn't that Madeline was mean. She wasn't. But she didn't have to be. Their parents made the difference, so clear that Madeline never had to lift a finger to earn their attention. It was simply hers by default. By the time they were in elementary school, Christmas morning had become a ritual of silent comparison. Madeline unwrapped the latest electronics, high-end craft kits, and designer clothes. Harper got books she'd never asked for, socks, and practical supplies. One year, she received a calculator. "You like numbers," her dad had shrugged. That same morning, Madeline got a karaoke machine and a silver bracelet engraved with her initials. Their mother gushed. "She's just such a natural performer." At school, Harper started carving out her own space. She wasn't flashy or loud, but she was sharp. She won her 5th grade business fair with a homemade lemonade stand that calculated inventory and margins on an old spreadsheet she coded herself. Her teacher called it impressive for a 10-year-old. Her parents barely noticed. When Harper brought home straight A's, her mother smiled absently and said, "Don't forget to help Madeline with her social studies project." When she made the honor roll 3 years in a row, her father said, "That's nice, but it's important to be well-rounded too." Only one person ever made her feel truly seen, her grandmother, Irene. Every summer, Harper spent 2 weeks at Irene's cabin near Sun Valley. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just sketch pads, old business magazines, and long talks over sun tea. "You have a mind like wildfire," Irene would say, tapping Harper's temple. "Let the world underestimate you, and then set it ablaze." In middle school, Harper joined Junior Achievement. By freshman year of high school, she was running the school's online fundraiser program and had helped triple their annual revenue. Teachers loved her. Classmates respected her. But at home, she was the quiet one, the self-sufficient one. Her parents praised her independence, not because they admired it, but because it meant they didn't have to worry about her. Meanwhile, Madeline was struggling in math, but excelling in charm. She had dozens of friends, led the cheer squad, and always had help. Tutors, private lessons, new clothes before every dance. Harper once asked her mother if she could sign up for a summer entrepreneurship camp in Seattle. Her mother barely looked up from her tablet. "That's quite expensive, sweetheart. Why don't you just read a few business books instead?" That night, Harper cried quietly into her pillow, not because of the camp, but because she already knew the answer before she asked. By the time they both reached high school, the pattern had calcified. Madeline was the chosen one, and Harper was the useful one. Madeline got to dream. Harper was expected to manage. But somewhere in those years, between the disappointments and the dismissals, something inside Harper changed. She stopped asking. She stopped hoping for equal treatment. She stopped trying to prove her worth to people determined not to see it. Instead, she began preparing for a life they couldn't control, for a future they couldn't deny, for a moment when their assumptions would no longer matter. The day Harper received her acceptance letter to Riverside State University, she nearly dropped the envelope from how hard her hands were shaking. Thick cardstock, bold seal. "We are pleased to welcome you to our Business and Entrepreneurship Honors Program." She stood frozen in the kitchen, the letter open in her hands, heart racing. "I got in," she whispered. Then louder, "Mom, Dad, I got in." Her father glanced up from his phone. "That's nice, Harper." She blinked. Full acceptance. Honors track. Business program. Before either of them could process what she was saying, the front door flung open. Madeline burst in, waving a nearly identical envelope. "I got into Riverside, too. Political science. Can you believe it?" Everything shifted instantly. Her mother leapt up from the couch, wrapping Madeline in a theatrical hug. Her father's face lit up in a way Harper hadn't seen in years. "We knew you'd do it, sweetheart," he said, already popping open the champagne they kept for special occasions. Harper stood beside the refrigerator, the letter dangling in her hand, as her family toasted Madeline's success with sparkling cider and selfies for Facebook. Her own news had been forgotten within minutes. She slipped away to her room without a word. The envelope landed quietly on her desk. 2 weeks later, the real gut punch arrived. It was a rare, full family dinner, just the four of them. Her parents had made grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, the kind of meal they saved for company. Harper thought, maybe, just maybe, this was about both of them starting college. Her father cleared his throat. "We need to talk about tuition." Harper sat up straighter. He turned to Madeline. "We've been saving for your education since you were born. It's not going to be easy, but we can cover all 4 years. That way, you can focus entirely on your studies." Harper waited. The silence dragged on, and then kept dragging. She looked between them. "What about mine?" Her father didn't look at her. Her mother gave a tight smile, reaching for her wine glass. "Harper, you've always been so independent. You've done great on your own, so far. We're proud of that." "That's not an answer," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I got into the business program, with honors. You said." Her father finally looked at her then, but there was no warmth, just strategy, like she was a numbers problem he had already solved. We had to make a choice. And the truth is, Madeline has always shown more promise. The word sliced clean through her chest. She's more aligned with a traditional academic path, her mother added. We just feel our investment will yield stronger outcomes with her. Harper blinked hard, trying to keep her voice steady. You're telling me you saved for her, and not for me? We had to be practical. I've had straight A's for 4 years, she said, breath catching. I've worked jobs after school. I've run fundraisers. I've managed budgets. What part of that isn't promise? Her father folded his napkin, voice flat. Your sister deserves this, Harper. You're different. The room went still. Harper stood slowly. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her fingers curled tightly into fists at her sides. She deserves it, she repeated. But I don't. No one stopped her as she left the table. Later that night, she locked herself in her bedroom and screamed silently into her pillow. The walls didn't care. The house didn't shift. And downstairs, the celebration continued. But something cracked open inside her. It wasn't just heartbreak. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. They had made their choice. So she would make hers. And when the time came, they would remember this moment. Not for the salmon, not for the wine, but for the daughter they quietly discarded, who would one day become impossible to ignore. The morning after that dinner, Harper packed a small duffel bag and drove 2 hours to her grandmother's cabin in Sun Valley. She didn't tell anyone she was going, not even Madeline. The winding roads through the pines blurred behind her as hot tears tracked down her cheeks. She wasn't sure what she needed, only that she couldn't breathe inside that house a minute longer. Irene Collins didn't ask questions. She just opened the front door, wrapped Harper in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and cedarwood, and sat her down at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of strong tea. Harper told her everything, every raw word, every hollow silence. When she finished, Irene didn't try to console her. She simply took Harper's hand and said, "They're wrong about you, my girl. Deeply wrong. But one day, you'll be too far above for them to see." That night, Harper didn't cry. She opened her laptop and made a plan. Within the week, she was back in Boise, sitting in the cramped office of her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Sloan. They combed through scholarships, financial aid, and student loan options. Harper applied to every single program she qualified for, and many she technically didn't. "You're not waiting for a door to open," Mrs. Sloan told her, impressed. "You're kicking down walls." In total, she submitted 32 scholarship applications, completed her FAFSA, and met with 3 loan officers. She knew her odds were slim, but she didn't have the luxury of doubt. And when the replies started rolling in, 5 scholarships, totaling nearly $8,000, Harper didn't celebrate. She recalculated. Tuition was still short. Rent was a separate mountain entirely. She took a part-time job at Sunrise Coffee, a local cafe near campus. The manager was hesitant at first. "You're overqualified," he said. "Won't school come first?" Harper looked him in the eye. "I can do both," she said flatly. "I have to." He hired her on the spot. Before classes even began, Harper was working 25 hours a week, sharing a appealing 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other students she'd found on a housing forum. She claimed the smallest room, just enough space for a mattress and a thrifted desk. Her books came from the library or were borrowed from seniors who'd graduated. Every dollar mattered, every minute scheduled. Her day started at 4:30 a.m. Open the cafe, prep, serve, clean. Then sprint to class. Economics, marketing, operations management. Between lectures, she'd work on assignments in the back corner of the library or outside under a tree with broken Wi-Fi. After class, she'd return to the cafe or pick up weekend shifts at a used bookstore. The exhaustion was a living thing inside her chest, but so was something else. Drive. One night, after her last class, Harper stumbled into her apartment to find a Tupperware container labeled "H. Eat Me." It was pasta, Warm. Real food. And the note came from Hannah Reyes, her new roommate, a biomedical engineering major with a sarcastic smile and a heart full of quiet rebellion. "You looked like a ghost yesterday," Hannah said when Harper thanked her. "No one does all that unless they're running from something or toward something." They became friends, not the kind who took selfies at parties, but the kind who left meals in the fridge and edited each other's essays at midnight. When Harper nearly fell asleep over her laptop one night, Hannah handed her a mug of tea and said, "No one's coming to save us, huh?" Harper nodded. "So we save ourselves." By mid-semester, Harper was earning top marks. Her professors noted her discipline, her insight, her ability to apply theory to real life. In business ethics, she submitted a paper analyzing supply chain accountability using her cafe job as a case study. Professor Dana Wexler called her in after class. "Ms. Collins," she said, "you think like someone who's already in the field. Ever considered research?" It was the first time a professor had truly seen her. Harper didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, "I'd like to learn everything you're willing to teach." From there, the trajectory began to shift. While Madeline posed at sorority formals and went home for Sunday dinners, Harper was building something else, a reputation. Among faculty, among working students, among the few who recognized brilliance wrapped in quiet fire. She hadn't forgotten what her parents said. She'd just stopped needing their permission to prove them wrong, and she was only getting started. Professor Wexler's office became Harper's second classroom, then her lab, and eventually her launch pad. After weeks of data analysis and late-night brainstorming, the research assistantship evolved into something more than a bullet point on a resume. It became a crucible for Harper's vision. One rainy Thursday afternoon, as they reviewed survey data from local businesses affected by the pandemic, Wexler leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "You've got a mind for systems," she said, "but more than that, you notice what others miss. Like how under-resourced businesses often don't need big changes. They need clarity. Have you ever considered building a service platform?" Harper paused. "A platform?" Wexler nodded. "Virtual support. Streamlined. Affordable. You'd be surprised how many small-town bakeries and family-run repair shops are drowning in digital chaos. Marketing, invoices, social media. It's not that they're failing. They're just overwhelmed." That night, Harper couldn't sleep. Her roommate, Hannah, found her at 2 a.m. on the couch, surrounded by scribbled notes and whiteboard diagrams. "What are you doing?" "Building a map," Harper said, "for something people don't even know they need yet." By the end of the semester, Harper had quietly launched North Fire Assist, a remote support service for small businesses in underserved areas. She started with 2 clients, a florist in Coeur d'Alene and a mechanic in Twin Falls. She designed websites, created invoice templates, managed social media schedules. Nothing flashy, but efficient, and they paid on time. With her part-time jobs and research stipend, Harper now had just enough to pay rent, eat something besides noodles, and keep North Fire running. Word spread. A professor recommended her to a cousin who ran a bookstore. A cafe owner sent her name to a friend. By the start of junior year, Harper had 10 clients and was training 2 other students to take on support roles. She didn't just build a business, she built a team. And slowly, people started noticing. The university's business department featured her in their newsletter. Local papers ran a blurb about young entrepreneur balancing books and business. Harper didn't care for the attention, but she knew it mattered. For future investors, future credibility. She forwarded the article to Professor Wexler with a one-word email. "Thanks." Wexler replied, "Proud of you. Keep your fire aimed forward." Meanwhile, Madeline was hitting a wall. Political science wasn't about charm. It was about research, writing, rigor. Harper started getting messages late at night. "Do you remember how to cite court opinions? Can you look at my thesis intro?" At first, she ignored them. But when Madeline showed up outside her apartment one evening, soaked from a sudden thunderstorm, clutching a USB drive and visibly shaking, Harper didn't slam the door. Instead, she made tea. "What happened?" she asked gently. Madeline stared at her cup. "Professor Ramirez said my senior paper is borderline failing. She wants me to restructure the whole thing. I have 3 weeks." Harper folded her arms. "You want my help now?" "I don't know who else to ask," Madeline whispered. You seem to know how to do all of this." There was a silence between them, years thick. Harper could have said no, could have thrown their parents' favoritism in Madeline's face. But she didn't. Instead, she pulled out a fresh notebook. "Then let's start over. Tell me what the argument's supposed to be." Helping Madeline became a strange form of therapy. Through sleepless editing nights and heated research debates, the bitterness between them softened. Madeline began to see just how steep Harper's climb had been, and how little support she had had. "You've been doing all this," Madeline said one night, staring at Harper's calendar filled with deadlines and client meetings, "without help." Harper shrugged. "I had Hannah. I had Professor Wexler. And I had to." Madeline looked at her, really looked like she was seeing her sister for the first time. "Mom and Dad. They always said you were just keeping your head down. But this is something else. You're running a company." Harper gave a tired smile. "Yeah. Funny what someone can build when no one's watching." By the end of junior year, Harper's business was profitable. Her GPA was untouched, and her reputation in the department was untouchable. Professor Wexler nominated her for the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. First prize, $50,000 in business funding and national recognition. "You're not just a student anymore," Wexler told her. "You're the blueprint." Weeks of prep followed. Harper fine-tuned her pitch, refined her slides, and mapped out her growth plan down to the last decimal. She competed in 3 rounds. The judges asked tough questions. She didn't flinch. She won. The university's front page ran her story with a photo of Harper, modest dress, firm handshake, and an oversized check in hand. The caption read, "Student CEO breaks barriers with business born of survival." She sent a copy to her grandmother. Irene called that night, voice thick with tears. "I always knew, Harper. And now they do too." The night Madeline submitted her final thesis, she didn't go back to her dorm or her sorority house. She came straight to Harper's apartment, balancing takeout and 2 cheap bottles of sparkling cider. "I thought we could celebrate," she said, sheepish. Harper raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to be seen with the family disappointment?" Madeline winced, but didn't flinch. She set the food down on Harper's tiny table. "You were never the disappointment. I just didn't see it before." They ate in silence for a few minutes, plastic forks scraping against styrofoam containers. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, but inside it was warm, honest. "I used to think you were cold," Madeline said finally. "But now I get it. You weren't cold. You were surviving." Harper looked at her sister for a long time. The girl who had once gotten everything, effortlessly. Now, sitting across from her was a young woman who had been humbled and changed. "You know," Harper said slowly, "there were nights I skipped dinner so I could afford a textbook. And you were going home on weekends so Mom could take you shopping for new boots." Madeline's eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't know." "You didn't have to know," Harper replied, her tone neutral. "You had a net. I had teeth." Madeline exhaled. "I've been rethinking a lot lately. What I want to do. Who I want to be." She glanced up. "After seeing everything you've built, I realize I've been standing on a platform someone else built for me. You built yours from nothing." There was no bitterness in her voice, only admiration. "I want to be better," she added quietly. "Not just for me, but for the people we'll meet, the ones who didn't get the lucky draw like I did." For the first time in their adult lives, Harper smiled at her sister, not out of politeness, not out of obligation, but something real. "You don't have to be me," she said. "You just have to see people like me." Madeline nodded. "And maybe amplify them, instead of talking over them." The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet shift in their relationship. Madeline began turning down lavish gifts from their parents, politely refusing a new iPad, saying she could manage without a summer abroad program. She even started defending Harper during family calls. "She's doing more than fine," Madeline said once over speakerphone. "You should really start paying attention." It wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about recognition. And as graduation day approached, Harper realized something stunning. She had found something with her sister that years of parental approval couldn't buy. Genuine respect, mutual understanding, a new beginning, built on truth, not on performance. And it was only just beginning. The morning of graduation dawned impossibly bright, the kind of blue sky brilliance that seemed almost staged, like the universe was in on something. Harper dressed in silence, pulling the gown over her shoulders, her hands calm, steady. Her grandmother's stole, embroidered in silver thread, lay folded with reverence on her bed. The words stitched along its hem still echoed in her chest. "Diamonds are made under pressure." Hannah drove her to campus in the beat-up Corolla they'd nursed through 2 winters. "You ready to shut the world up?" she teased. Harper smiled faintly. "I'm ready to say it out loud." The campus buzzed with parents in formal wear, siblings chasing balloons, graduates adjusting caps and cords. Harper spotted Madeline first. Her cap slightly crooked, cheeks flushed with excitement. She rushed over and wrapped Harper in a tight, almost trembling hug. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what happens in there, you've already won." They stood shoulder to shoulder as the procession began. Harper felt a strange stillness inside her, not nerves, not fear, just certainty. This was her moment, and she had earned every second of it. The ceremony moved swiftly. The dean's speech, the conferral of degrees, the polite applause. But everything changed when President Harlow stepped to the podium. "Before we conclude today's commencement," he began, "we have a few special recognitions that represent the best of what Riverside State stands for." Harper's name was the first he spoke. She rose from her seat, walked steadily to the stage, and took her place behind the podium. From this angle, the auditorium stretched into a sea of faces, thousands of them. Somewhere near the front, she saw them, her parents. Her mother's posture was upright, tight-lipped. Her father leaned forward slightly, as if trying to make sense of her presence up there. Harper took a breath. "For years ago," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I arrived at this university with a borrowed suitcase, a scholarship rejection in my inbox, and the terrifying knowledge that I was on my own." A ripple passed through the room. "I worked 30 hours a week, every week. I shared a 1-burner kitchen with 3 roommates. I wrote marketing plans at midnight and cleaned coffee machines at 5 a.m. And I built something, a business, a reputation, and most of all, a version of myself no one else imagined I could become." She paused. The room was silent. I wasn't supported financially. I wasn't cheered from the sidelines. I wasn't the chosen one. But I showed up. I stayed up. And I stood up. Applause erupted, soft at first, then growing. Harper didn't flinch. "I know many of you out there have stories like mine. Stories of rising quietly while others got the spotlight, of building in the shadows. This speech isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. Because sometimes the loudest triumphs are born from the deepest silence." The applause returned, stronger now. She glanced toward her grandmother. Irene sat beaming, her hands folded neatly in her lap, pride radiating from every wrinkle. When she returned to her seat, President Harlow stepped forward again. "In addition to delivering today's student address," he said, "HarperCollins has been selected unanimously by the faculty as this year's valedictorian. Graduating with a perfect GPA and founding a business, now serving clients across the Pacific Northwest. Gasps echoed. Applause thundered. Her parents were stone still. President Harlow continued. Ms. Collins is also the recipient of the National Collegiate Business Innovation Award, bringing national recognition to our university. And perhaps most striking of all, she has accomplished all of this without any financial support from her family. There it was. The air in the auditorium shifted. Murmurs rose like smoke. Parents turned toward each other. Students blinked at their programs. Harper didn't look at her parents, but she didn't need to. She could feel the silence radiating from their seats like a vacuum. And then one final blow. In honor of her extraordinary resilience, President Harlow said, the Board of Trustees is establishing the Harper Collins Resilience Scholarship, awarded annually to a student who overcomes personal or financial adversity in pursuit of higher education. The room stood, literally, a standing ovation. Harper rose awkwardly, her hands trembling now for the first time that morning. She turned, looked out over the crowd, and met her mother's eyes. What she saw there wasn't pride. It wasn't even guilt. It was recognition and the sickening weight of too late realization. Harper nodded once. Not a bow, not a thank you, a declaration. I did this without you, and now the whole world knows. That evening, Harper stood outside the rental house her parents had booked for the family celebration. The lawn was manicured, the porch decorated with silver balloons that read, "Congratulations, Madeline!" As if the events of that morning had never happened. She almost turned around, but her grandmother's words echoed in her ear. Sometimes you show up, not for them, but for you. To let the silence know it doesn't own you anymore. Harper stepped through the front door. The room quieted instantly. Conversations stuttered. Wine glasses paused midair. Then came the rush. Relatives flooding toward her with congratulations, curious smiles, and a dozen variations of "I had no idea." Her parents stood near the dining room, posture stiff. Her mother's smile was brittle, her father's face unreadable. Madeline crossed the room to meet her, eyes full of silent solidarity. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. "You ready for this?" Harper nodded. More than ever. Dinner was served, but the tension sat heavier than the roasted chicken. Her Uncle Jack, already half a glass deep, broke the silence first. "So, Harper," he said with a grin, "when were you planning to tell us you're basically the Steve Jobs of Idaho?" A few chuckles followed. Her father cleared his throat. "She's always been entrepreneurial," he said with forced warmth. "Just kept it quiet, that's all." Harper's voice cut clean across the table. "You mean ignored?" Silence fell like glass shattering. Her mother shifted uncomfortably. "We just didn't realize how serious it was, sweetheart. You were always so independent." "Independent by necessity," her grandmother Irene said sharply. "Not by choice." Aunt Susan raised an eyebrow. "Wait, are you saying they didn't help at all?" She turned to Harper. "Didn't the university president say?" "Yes," Harper said calmly. "They paid Madeline's full tuition. I paid mine with loans, scholarships, and 3 jobs. Every year." Her father stiffened. "That's not fair. We did what we thought was best at the time." "For who?" Madeline said suddenly, her voice shaking. "Because it wasn't best for her." All eyes turned. "You gave me everything," Madeline continued, voice rising. "And I coasted. She built a business while I planned parties. She survived while I thrived on support. And now she's being honored while I'm just watching." Their mother's eyes filled with tears, but said nothing. "Intent doesn't erase impact," Harper said. "And whatever the excuse, the result is the same. You bet on the wrong daughter." The table was frozen. Then Irene stood slowly, raising her wine glass with a hand that didn't tremble. "To Harper," she said, "for proving that resilience speaks louder than favoritism. and for showing this family what real success looks like. They toasted, everyone except Harper's parents. And Harper? She didn't care. For the first time, the weight was no longer hers to carry. It had returned at last to where it belonged. Weeks after graduation, Harper stood in the office of the Dean of Business at Riverside State, holding a folder that contained something far more powerful than a diploma. It was the finalized paperwork for the HarperCollins Resilience Scholarship, funded by her startup's first-year profits and the competition winnings she hadn't touched. The scholarship wasn't for perfect GPAs or test scores. It was for the invisible fighters, the ones who worked overnight shifts, cared for siblings, skipped meals to buy textbooks, the ones like her. This fund, she told the committee, is for the students people overlook, because sometimes overlooked doesn't mean unqualified. It just means underestimated. A week later, she moved into her new apartment near downtown Portland, close to the offices of Summit and Sloan Strategy, where she was already onboarding as their youngest ever associate consultant. Her team from North Fire Assist continued to run the platform under her mentorship, now with fair salaries, health stipends, and a rotating paid internship spot exclusively for students from the scholarship program. Madeline visited often. Their bond, once strained by years of imbalance, had grown strong in truth. She'd taken a job at a nonprofit focused on educational access, inspired by Harper's story, and perhaps, too, by the ache of her own awakening. Their parents? They kept their distance at first. Then, one Sunday, they asked Harper to meet them for lunch. Neutral ground. Stiff apologies followed, acknowledgement in careful words. We misjudged. We made assumptions. We thought we were doing the right thing. Harper listened quietly. She didn't offer them a clean slate, but she didn't burn the table either. I don't need you to rewrite the past, she said, but if we build something new, it has to be built on truth. Her mother teared up. Her father nodded once. It was the closest they had ever come to humility. That night, Harper sat on her balcony, the city lights flickering like promises, and reread a letter her grandmother had written her long before graduation. It ended with one line, "Don't let pain make you small. Let it carve out the room for something bigger." She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the back of her journal. Not everything that breaks you is your enemy. Sometimes it's the chisel that shapes who you were always meant to become.